Great. Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's really a great honor and privilege to join you to give this keynote lecture. It certainly is unfortunate that we can't all be together. I anticipate we'll be able to be together again in the future. So we'll hold on to that hope. And there could be, I think, no more important topic to talk about today from the standpoint of kind of current events than a focus on diversity and inclusion. And what I really do want to focus on in my presentation is how diversity and inclusion is interwoven into the ACC strategic plan. We can talk a lot about diversity and inclusion at your own institutions or in other areas of your life or organizations or volunteer organizations you might be part of. But I'm going to really focus on the ACC, the strategic plan, and what we've done. The title of my talk, the full title is, where have we been and where are we going, really? And so I want to, for the most part, spend the first part talking to you about what we've been doing and then tell you a little bit about the future. And then I really look forward, I hope we can remotely field some questions and comments that you may have. So it's very clear that diversity and inclusion is essential to the realization of our mission, values, our patients' health, and also strategic business goals as a profession and as a professional society. Although I don't include it on this slide, there is a real business case for diversity and inclusion in all organizations. And it's important to keep that in mind when we think about what the why of diversity and inclusion is. So in medicine, why do we care about diversity? We know because of actual research studies that have been done at a population health level and some individual studies that a diverse workforce in medicine better serves diverse patients. And this has been shown in multiple different ways and for years now. So this is really irrefutable. You'll hear some discussion about maybe this is not the case, but it's really true that diversity helps serve a more diverse patient group. Diversity also helps us better engage our communities for the very same reason, because diversity in medicine helps us kind of fan out and be more engaged in our communities in a very large way. The impact on diversity in medicine on health equity is a very parallel track. We know that health equity in our patients, who are from a wide variety of socioeconomic strata, are better served from a health equity standpoint if we are more diverse in our workforce. We all have different points of view, and we bring those to problem solving and debates. And some of those points of view really are brought out because of our diversity. And so that's important as well. It's also been proven that diversity in our workplace improves our team care and helps to prevent burnout. This is an area of a great deal of interest in the college and, of course, all across the House of Medicine. And others in the college outside of our diversity and inclusion task force have been doing a lot around helping us and our membership around preventing burnout. So keep in mind that diversity is really an issue, it can really be beneficial there. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about clinical investigation later in the talk, but we know that diversity among investigators in clinical trials across a wide variety of different specialties, not just in cardiovascular trials, brings a very different perspective to scholarly activities. So let's just talk about cardiology in the United States. We're talking about cardiology here, and this is not international, this is the US. So in comparison to the United States in general, adult cardiology has fewer African Americans and Hispanics. And you can see that the graph shows us exactly how many fewer. This is data from 2015 that I'm showing you. Less than 10% of medical students and less than 3% of School of Medicine faculty are African American. In 2015-16, just over 5% of cardiovascular trainees were African American and 6.8% were Hispanic, compared to 5.8% and 7.8% in internal medicine. So that shows us that this is not just a cardiology problem as far as this underrepresented groups, these two underrepresented groups, African Americans and Hispanics. This is across medicine, and I'll show you that in the next couple slides. As you probably know, the ACC has done a professional life survey now 3 times over the decades. And the most recent one in 2016 suggested that African Americans and Hispanics each represent about 3 to 6% of our ACC membership. Just for your knowledge, it's about 85% of cardiologists in the United States belong to the ACC. So what our percentages are in ACC do to a large extent reflect what we see in US cardiology. So here are the trainees by race and ethnicity in 2015 and 16. And over here on the left, you can see that now this bar is not 100%, don't get confused, this is 10%. So 10%, roughly 9% African Americans, about 10% Hispanic. This is all residents of all different specialties. And here's cardiology here. So you can see Hispanic population a little bit higher, but not much. And here are in the hatch bars are African Americans. And so we see that this is an issue in medicine. This is not an issue just for cardiology. So we call this the deep pipeline issue. So when we talk about a pipeline, we have to get grade school, middle school, and high school kids into college, then into medicine, and then into the specialties. So there's not a large pipeline of African Americans and Hispanics going into medicine. So this is the pipeline issue that I'm showing you with this slide. And it affects cardiology, but it also affects the other specialties as well. Look at, for example, ortho over here. So some specialties are more prominently disadvantaged in this regard than others. What about men versus women? So in the United States, about half of the population is men, about half are women. In adult cardiology, and again, we're talking about adult cardiology, pediatrics has a different demographic. So I'm showing you today stats from adult cardiology. 2005, about 10% of FACCs who are board certified cardiologists were women. Back then, 2015, about half of internal medicine residents were women. That remains so today. Also, just over half of medical school students are women as well. So in 2015, 21% of our adult cardiology FITs were women. That's grown a little bit, and I'll show you. And so women have been underrepresented in cardiovascular fellowship compared to almost every other specialty of internal medicine. Just a little blurb, this is happily changing, but we also did a deep dive into ACC awards. And in 2015, this is when the survey was done, 465 awards had been given and only 31 had gone to women. That's 6.7%. Of those, 10 went to pediatric cardiologists, 2 to statisticians, 1 to a layperson. And so less than 4% of the awards went to adult cardiovascular FACCs who were women. This has changed happily as you may well know, because some pretty prominent women have been honored for their efforts recently. Among ACGME training programs, only neurosurgery and orthopedics generally have had fewer women. Women are better represented in vascular surgery, GI, pulmonary, urology, and thoracic surgery. This is also true now for general surgery. About 40% of general surgery trainees are women. Intervention and EP, sadly, are the least diverse training programs in US medicine. So here's a comparison of women specialists over time. You can see 2007 on the left and 2015 on the right. And a little bit of change over time with the 9.7% of cardiovascular disease, a specialist going to 13%, but certainly not the same change that we've seen in other specialties. So this is some work that I did with some of our fellows where we looked over 25 years, what has happened in the subspecialties if you look at the percentage of women in the subspecialties over time. And as you probably, this audience knows, this is us down here. We're the lowest and we've changed the least. So this is cardiovascular disease trainees. And you can see that the other specialties have risen, with some of the specialties now being predominantly women. Endocrinology is one of them. And so we see this, that there's been change over time with all specialties, including cardiology. But if you look, for example, over the last 5 years of this graph, this was really flat. We had a little uptick now in the next 2 years. I'm going to show you that data. So there's something about cardiology that that really is not appealing. We have some data on that, and I'm going to show you a couple papers about it. So these are trainees by sex in 2015 and 16. And we like to call this the talent gap. So here's the cardiology talent gap, because we see this percentage of women in internal medicine, about 43%, down to 21% of cardiology fellows. So here's the big talent gap. And then if we look at EP and intervention, look at the talent gap here when we go from general cardiology to intervention and EP. So those are the areas that we really need to work on. This is the most recent data from 2018 and 2019 and I put this together last year. The new data for 2020 usually comes out, it's usually published by the ACGME in the fall. So we'll have new data from 2020 about the new fellows, but we saw a little bit of a bump up in cardiology fellows. So 24% now FITs are women, a tiny bump in interventional cardiology, flat to decline in EP, sadly. Here's advanced heart failure transplant cardiology. My field has been robustly sought after by women for some time, but interestingly went down just a little bit from 30%. This is adult congenital heart disease, and this has, as you probably know, always had a pretty reasonable representation of women. So stay tuned. I'm hopeful that this year, there's, I think, a lot of efforts have been going on to make sure that internal medicine residents and medical students understand our field and understand our joy in the field, and that hopefully those things are having an impact. And so stay tuned for the 2020 data. So diversity and inclusion is mission critical for the ACC. This is just mission critical because it's in alignment with our mission, our values, and our patient care. And we know that we really can't, in the current era, achieve our clinical, our education, and our business goals as a professional society unless we focus on diversity and inclusion. And change is really going to require intention and unflinching execution. That means we can't just constantly identify the problems as I just have and say, well, what's the story? What, why is all this happening? Why are we underserved by women and underrepresented cardiologists? We really have to be intentional. We have to have metrics. We have to understand what the problem is and take appropriate action. So some of you may be really familiar with the ACC's 2019 and 2023 strategic plan. This is a 5-year strategic plan worked on by many, many people. And some of you may have been in the work groups and the various, there was a lot of people surveyed. The Board of Governors, chapters were lots of different groups. And so you might have had input into this. I'm not going to go into the entire strategic plan, but I want to bring you to what's important around our diversity and inclusion goals, because in our 5-year strategic plan, these are the 4 strategic goals, and underneath them, the key strategies that were determined to be the strategic goals of the college. And I'm going to go from right to left and end up with what's on the left. So one is to ensure organizational growth and sustainability, to advance quality, equity, and value of cardiovascular care, to generate and deliver actionable knowledge, and then to increase relevance as the CV professional home. That's for all of our members and all people in cardiology, physicians, nurses, the entire team. So one of the bullet points or key strategies underneath that is actually to increase member diversity and inclusion. So this is part of the strategic plan of the college. You haven't just been hearing a lot of buzz recently on social media or elsewhere in various publications about diversity and inclusion. This is in alignment with the strategic goals. It is one of the strategic goals of the college. So how are we going to do that, or how are we doing it? We know that we have to integrate these efforts across the entire organization. It can't be, I'm going to show you the task force of which I'm part, and I'm privileged to be a part, but we know that we can't just form a task force and then ask that group of people to change an entire organization. So we know that these efforts have to go across the organization. We have to identify and understand barriers into the entry of the field of cardiology. And this is for all underrepresented groups, including women, and the 2 groups most prominently that I just mentioned, Latinx and African Americans. Also Native and Pacific Islanders are underrepresented as well. And then we can't just get people into our field. We have to ensure that the leadership of the college and our profession reflects this diversity. Now that may take some time because we have to kind of build the bench, and we're in the process of building the bench. And then those people who are already in our profession, we have to make sure that they have a pathway to leadership so that they can lead the organization. So to address these issues, once the strategic plan was in place, the ACC Diversity and Inclusion Task Force was formed in early 2017. It is a task force that reports directly to the Board of Trustees. And the initial goals included to ensure that both cardiovascular medicine in general, as well as the ACC in itself, benefits from diversity of backgrounds, experiences, perspectives in leadership, cardiovascular healthcare delivery, business, education, and science. And you'll see that we said to ensure that both cardiovascular medicine in general, as well as ACC itself, because we can only change some of the things within the ACC, but if we don't actually put the efforts toward the whole profession, we won't succeed. Goal number 2 is to attract and provide rewarding careers and leadership opportunities for the full range of talented individuals in medicine. And then thirdly, to ensure that the diverse health needs of cardiovascular patients and populations are met by cardiovascular clinicians who are sensitive and prepared to meet the unique needs of their various, whoops, I switched by mistake, gender, cultural, racial, ethnic, and other dimensions of diversity. So those are our goals. These are the members of the Task Force on Diversity. I'm not going to go into great detail, except to say that Pam Douglas has been our chair. My co-vice chairs are Clyde Yancey and Kim Williams. A wide variety of other people, some of whom represent other organizations such as Gerald Johnson, who's the Chief Diversity Officer of the AHA, and Lauren Kane, for example, is a member of the Society for Thoracic Surgeons. So we have representation from lots of different areas. This is our picture from, I picked this from, I think it's 2 years old now. And I wanted to show you what we looked like in person at Hart House. Remember Hart House? How much we love it, and how much we love going there. And this was our meeting just about 2 weeks ago. So every summer since the task force has been in place, we've met for an in-person meeting as a retreat at Hart House. And you can see it was a virtual meeting, very productive this year. And you can see this was our formal photo. We'll get back to Hart House, don't worry. So what is the diversity and inclusion vision for the ACC? And that is that ACC will harness the power of the diversity of its members to spur innovation, advance patient care, and improve health equity among individual patients and populations. We will ensure opportunity for all cardiovascular providers by working toward a fully inclusive organization and profession. And the core value is that the college recognizes the importance of the mission of including all people as members and as leaders who provide a diversity of background, experience, ideas, and perspectives. So an underrepresented cardiovascular professional is defined as a significantly lower proportion of its members and or leaders relative to the US population and or relative to the available source population. This includes parents, specialty, and residency programs. So under this group for underrepresented cardiologists, and we've really been using the term URC quite a bit now, includes women, Latinx, African Americans, Pacific Islanders, Native Americans. So there are some ethnicities that are not as significantly underrepresented in medicine or cardiology as those groups. And that's why when the sort of umbrella term URC is mentioned, that's what we're talking about. I think these objectives, yeah, I think these objectives I've already covered in a couple other slides. So let's get to some of the brass tacks of what we've been doing. And at the very end, I'm going to kind of tell you on what our most recent work has been. So building the effort, we had to have commitment from the leadership, which we did. As you know, I said that the task force was impaneled by the Board of Trustees. We know that we will not be successful unless we gather data, analyze the data, and then disseminate it. And this is happening in multiple different ways. We are looking at data on who is appointed to committees, who is appointed to committees. We're currently very interested in the JACC journals and are doing a deep dive with the publications committee to look at what type of diversity we have on the editorial boards so that we can address any areas that we see are less than ideally diverse. There are some journals that have done an amazing job at being very diverse. I'm going to call out one of them, which is the Circulation Quality Outcomes, which was begun, that the inaugural editor was Harlan Krumholtz, and I know from personal conversation with him that his goal was to have half of the editorial board be women. And that was, Circ Quality Outcomes has been around for a decade maybe now. And this was unusual at the time, and he achieved it with his first editorial board, and that has been continued by Brahmaji, who has taken over the helm. So it can be done. That's just an example that I know very well from having spoken to Harlan. So gathering data is important, analyzing it, and then disseminating. We're going to tell people, we've already been telling people some news they might not want to hear about our lack of diversity. We have a strategic plan. We need operational excellence. We know that we need to have ongoing dialogue with leadership and with the Board of Trustees. We have had a monthly report to the Board of Trustees. We've reported in person on several occasions to the meeting just to make sure that there's sort of a two-way street there so that the Board of Trustees knows what the task force is doing and we can report in as to what our progress has been. So we really want to embed diversity and inclusion throughout the whole ACC. It's in the strategic plan. It's also in our we have established principles. Those principles are in the box on the right, and you can access those if you want to read them in detail by going on the acc.org Diversity and Inclusion web portal. And we, in order to make sure that we're adherent to these principles, we post these principles are in our our agenda book for every meeting, so that we as a task force, and we meet monthly, are thinking about these principles every time we're meeting. The nominating committee is focused on leadership competencies, and the past president is the nominating committee chair, so I chaired that 2 years ago, and we did something that hadn't been done before. All the committee appointments are now focused on competencies. You gotta say, these are my competencies for this position. So that's been a real revolutionary change in the college, but what we did, which has been ongoing for the subsequent cycles, is we looked at who applied for positions and looked at the demographics, and then we showed ourselves who were selected for committees to see if there was any bad news. Happily, that's been going pretty well, where we've been able to see that people who applied, the diversity of the people who applied is pretty similar to those selected. One big stumbling block is that we rarely know the ethnicity of who applies. We know gender often just by name. We cannot tell ethnicity without asking people. And so you will see a move in the future toward us asking you if you're want to be on a committee, you'll be asked now, could you please supply us this information? You can always decline if you don't feel comfortable, but we really are trying to get our arms around who's in the college and are we serving people well? And we can't really know that without knowing the baseline data. We know that evidence-based search practices include the major tenet of a diverse search practice is if you have a slate of candidates and they're not diverse, the rule of the game is you got to go back out to the field and see and put your search engine back out, because you will never get a diverse set of leadership if you don't have diversity on the mind when you do the search practices. Also, since the task force began in 2017, Rana Parekh is the ACC's new Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer, and that is a senior staff position. Big win for us because Rana is at work every day with other staff, including Stephanie Mitchell, who really work 24/7 on diversity and inclusion within the college. So I can't see this. Hang on a minute. I'm trying to, whoops. So number 3, changing the culture. I can't see on the Zoom thing. So lots of member communications. You can't be, I don't think you could be a member of the college without having heard some communication from us. The Board of Governors has been very active. 2 years ago, they had the Year of the Woman, and we're focused on women in cardiology, and there was a lot of different chapter activity around that. Every committee, section, and chapter we've connected with. In the State of the States report back, I think this was from 2 years ago, all but one chapter reported in, and most chapters reported that they were doing something around member engagement, around diversity activities. Some people were focused on the deep pipeline, and some were focused on women in cardiology, but the Board of Governors has been very, very active. And as I told you, the committee reports go directly to the Board of Trustees, and there's a lot of diversity and inclusion efforts on the part of the committees. This slide is old and probably needs to be updated, but we haven't resurveyed the chapters in the Board of Governors as yet, but we did ask, as far as WIC chapter networks, which states, which chapters have them, and the ones in the deep blue, ACC blue, do have active efforts around women in cardiology. So it's a very, very different thing than when I was governor of Indiana. Women in cardiology as a chapter effort was really not done. And I'll give kudos to a lot of people who put a lot of effort in this, and one of those is Claire Duvernois, who I think really led the idea that a chapter could become active in WIC. And she was, oh, there she is right there in the middle. Here's Claire, right there. There is an annual WIC leadership workshop that coincides with the LEDGE conference. I'm assured that this will happen in a virtual format this year. Legislative conference is going to be virtual as well, but stay tuned for that. May not even have, there might not be a limit to the number of people who can participate since it's virtual. So that's always been a very successful WIC event as well. We need to identify system barriers. We know that one of those is internal medicine residents' view of cardiology. And the way we know this is from studies that were done separate from our work group and our work in the college. But you see the two papers down below, Career Preferences and Perceptions of Cardiology from JAMA Cardiology that influence our internal medicine residents' choices. And also, what do cardiology fellows think about interventional cardiology? So these are our cliff issues where we see lots of internal medicine residents and then they don't go into cardiology. Cardiology fellows don't go into intervention as much. So we call that the cliff. The other one I told you about was the pipeline. This is the cliff. So as we've surveyed our residents, we find out a lot of things. And a resurvey is being done right now that's led, and I don't want to leave anyone out, but I believe Melissa Wood is the person who's leading that effort right now of resurveying the internal medicine residents. In fact, some of you may have facilitated that at your institutions. We have two policy statements, one of which has already been published. The Compensation and Opportunity Equity publication was published. Dr. Pam Douglas was the lead on that, and we are just going to peer review with the Flexible Careers ACC policy document, so stay tuned for that. We would anticipate publication within a few months of that one. Here's the front cover of the Health Policy and Cardiology Compensation and Opportunity Equity. If any of you are in the process of negotiating, renegotiating, or looking at your salary or position description, et cetera, this is an invaluable document that will give you a guidepost. I just recently sent the link to this paper to somebody who is in the process of meeting with her chief of cardiology around negotiation, and it can be really helpful. So expanding the pipeline, what are we doing there? This has been really a chapter-based effort, which it kind of has to be because we're focused on medical students, college students, and even younger. And so you kind of have to be local to the effort. And a lot of the chapters have taken this on. There's also a young scholars group that has gathered college students at ACC. It began at, I think the first year was ACC 19, and that was in New Orleans. The New Orleans chapter participated, the academic section, and then some other people who were local to New Orleans, and got these young people to the scientific sessions and got them to tour around and go to some of the scientific presentations. This was to have happened in Chicago as well. I think they did this virtually, and it is our dear hope, of course, to go to Atlanta in May in person if we can. But I am going to assume that that effort is going to take on a virtual platform if it's not in person. So there have been ACC chapter and section grants that are dedicated to pipeline development. So lots of work going on in the chapters in this space. So I told you about benchmarking, and we want to look at the face of cardiology as it's changing. And we can't figure this out unless we're counting. And we did see a success in looking from 2018 to 2019. Seeing more women faculty on the scientific sessions. I already told you about the nominating committee. The most recent two JACC journals have editors-in-chief who are women, Bonnie Key, Cardio-Oncology, and my colleague Julia Grapsa for JACC case reports. There is a new journal, which is called JACC Asia, and the opportunity to be an editor is open. So if you're interested and have knowledge in that particular area of the world, because that is one of the requirements, is to understand the science and sort of the research network there, that's a great opportunity. Again, we have little data on underrepresented cardiologists because we don't always know the ethnicity of who applies. We want to help develop new leaders. This is so get people into our field, but then what do? We have to bring you up and make sure you're a leader. So Leadership Forum and CV Summit, we focused on getting underrepresented cardiologists there. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Clinical Trials Research Up in Your Game program that I've worked on with Dr. Pam Douglas and Dr. Tracy Wang. And in partnership with Member Leadership Development, we are putting forward ACC branded implicit bias training in the form of a learning module. That is in process. It'll be available soon, and eventually we'll be able to get, we hope, MOC and even CME for that. So we know that the clinical trials research pipeline is not diverse, and we call it the CTR pipeline. So our first effort at addressing this was to hold a day-and-a-half long in-person meeting for 45 learners who were selected among 90 applicants. These were all women. And we put that program on. And I just show this because I think this was one of the most fun parts of the day. We did a career action exercise. Post on a sticky note, what's the first thing you'll do when you get home? This is what we did at the very last part of the day on the second day. And these were people had a wide variety of things that they had to say, very exciting. So why are we focused on that? We know that there are too few women in clinical trial leadership, and this is known not only by us, but also by those who are sponsors of clinical trials. And when we have less diversity in investigators, we have less diversity in the patient populations that are enrolled in trials. So there's clearly a business case for diversity. And so we got funding to do this, and I'm going to skip that in the interest of time. But this was some photos from our first cohort. Very successful, very engaged group. Nobody looked at their phone the whole time. This year, we're actually having a day-long program that is a year-long program, excuse me, that will start with a virtual. We've just, the applications have been out. We've actually made the selections of who the learners will be this year. And this will be, it'll be a virtual meeting in the fall first, and then we hope to have 2 in-person sessions throughout the year. So expanding that to a year-long program to enrich the process, to help boost people up. And then also this year it was not open only to women, it was open to men as well. I want to wrap up quickly because I don't want to run over my time. We have new awards. We know that diversity and inclusion is important, and the ACC Distinguished Diversity and Inclusion Leadership Award was first awarded to Richard Allen Williams and then Pam Douglas last year. And in the wake of that, and in recognition of Pam's work in this field, that award has actually been renamed in her honor. So major initiatives, again, I don't want to run over time. I'm in a virtual environment, but I'm pretty sure I'm right up at 30 minutes. So I'm going to just push on to what I want you to look at when you have an opportunity. Due to lots of things that are going on in the environment right now, including around implicit bias, some of the socioeconomic problems that we're seeing with differential effects of COVID, depending on race, ethnicity, et cetera. We wrote a piece that's in Cardiology Magazine titled "Where There is Crisis, There's Opportunity." And it's a message from the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force to all of you. And so please take time to read that. We put a lot of thought and effort into that. And this is the hub that you can go visit. We have, you can see 4 different places that you can click and find different information. We have a resource center, publications that are recommended, and our commitment. And it will give you in more detail than I've told you what our accomplishments have been, what we're working on now. It'll give you a resource center so that you can read on things that you're interested in and events that are coming up. And so with that, there's the Cardiology Magazine that we had earlier this year. So you can join the discussion if you want to ask questions or make comments to us. There's the link, and that's on acc.org. You can find it. Join the Friends of the Task Force, which you can do on that website as well. And again, here's the task force. And I thank you all very much, and I hope we have a few minutes for questions or comments. Thanks very much for having me.